All right. In theory, folks, we are live. Welcome once again to beautiful Franklin, Tennessee, just outside Nashville, home of the ComicBase Livestream. I'm going to just get some things going on here, and let me pop out the chat, and let's get this show on the road. All right, muting my volume for in the studio here. Thanks everyone for coming, everyone. And I put some notes in the show links to some things I'll be talking about later on. Theme for today is ComicBase speed tips, which woke up this morning and I said, well, I promised everyone ComicBase speed tips. I think I know a few. Let's see what I can come up with. And if you guys are looking here, this is everything we're to cover today. So if you've got that captured, you can just go. I mean, you know, we got it. Before we get down to business, though, a couple of other things, just in news of the universe. So, first of all, we have a new version out there, good grief, let me dig up that number for you here. Professional broadcasting at its best. All right, yes, this is version 3631, or version 20.0.2.3631. And something new that we're doing here, finally, is we're starting to put our interim build numbers out on the main part of the web page. So if you're to go ahead and you flip over to comicbase.com and you look over here, this is new as of about 15 minutes ago. You can actually see the official version number we've got here and also a link to the latest interim build. If you go there, it tells you everything we've been up to since the last time we forced everyone to upgrade, and it's going to be kind of a long list. So I'll give you some highlights of this latest one. First of all, for anyone who has ever used a number sign in your password, there was some back-end server stuff that was going on that, depending on what you put after that number sign, it would get interpreted as not really being that in your password by the back end. It would actually could be seen as an attack, and so you would have trouble logging in. You might have had to change your password. We've got that worked out on the back end, so I guess if you want number signs in your passwords, go for it. You probably saw this last time we played around with condition sets on last week's demo. It didn't immediately update in the grid. That was kind of embarrassing, so we got that fixed. And also, the big news is we've implemented the rebuild pictures list under file tools, which takes a really long time, but if you do it, it makes it so it can very, very efficiently get to your pictures, and we'll get to that in a bit. Let me go back to the live cam over here. Yes, you see me now. Excellent. Okay, so that's the news on the whole thing, and like I say, we'll be posting the current interim build number at the top of the website, and we've also rigged it so that whenever we post a new version, it automatically updates and keeps in sync the version numbers when you look at the download links, so that whatever we've just built, you actually see that same version number. So hopefully no more of this whole, it says the latest version is 2653, but then when you go to the download page, it's 2614, but then when you download it, it's really 2683. Hopefully all that nonsense is a thing of the past. So that said, I think we got that worked out, and now the next news is we're going to start putting an end to the ComicBase 2020 series. We're going to wrap up everything we've done into ComicBase 20.3, and then we're going to start turning our attention to ComicBase 2021. And that's the big news on this part, is we have a lot of ideas. We're going to be freezing the code base on 2020 pretty soon. We'll do one last roll-up release of 20.0.3. That'll be a forced update for everybody. So in other words, we'll make you download it before we let you download content updates. But then we don't anticipate doing any more tweaking on the 2020 series for a while as we start rolling out 2021. 2021 is where we do they call it a branch, if you're into source code. But what we'll be doing is we'll start rolling in all the features that we have kind of like sidelined and ready to throw in for ComicBase 2021. And if you want to actually be a part of that, we did something new with ComicBase 2020. We've never done it before, but it worked great, and I want to do it again, which is we basically invited the folks who are most active, who've got the most to say about things, who use the program a lot and want to pound on it, before it's ready for the outside world. We are going to invite you, frankly, to come behind the scenes with us and join our Slack group, which is it's internal only, with the exception of y'all. But what it does is it lets you directly talk to us as we're developing and say, hey, the latest build that came out 20 minutes ago has got the, this problem or that problem, or I do like this or I don't like that other thing. And we will talk directly to you as we're developing and, turn and burn. This typically, we would, when we were doing 2020, we would do 3-4 builds a day internally that people on the dev side of things got to see. And you could pound on them as much as you have an appetite to. But if you're interested in being part of that process, and what we'd be expecting for you, frankly, is one, that you've got some tolerance for putting up with stuff that doesn't look the best, because this is all preliminary stuff. You do get to see, again, everything as we're building it. And we frankly just want you to go and be in the chat. So the Slack is a tool we use where it lets you just chat directly with other people on the dev team. So you can say, hey, Pete, this is going on, or Mark, what's going on with that, or, Jill, whatever the thing is. Always can go back and forth, trade screenshots, do whatever the thing is, so you can say this is, again, working or not working on my particular machine. If you want to be part of that process, send me an email. That's pbickford@human-computing.com. And what we will do is I need your name, your full name and full name, your preferred email address. And then what I will do is I will send you an invite to our Slack group, which then all you gotta do is accept that, download the Slack software, it's free. And then you'll be part of the group as we spin up that effort in the next couple weeks. So I think it's kind of exciting. I had a lot of fun with it during the many months we were building ComicBase 2020, and it worked out really, really well, because, I mean, we got to have a lot of people from a lot of different parts of the world try stuff out on different machines, and we found things like, there were certain bugs that only happened on French Canadian systems set, that we would never found that prior to release if it hadn't been, for all the folks who contributed testing and gave the whole thing a run through before we put it out in the world. So I think it's pretty exciting. If you'd like to be part of that, send us a note. Okay, that's the news portion of things. Let's get on to the part where you're all here for, which is speed tips. Now, I had thought of whenever I read 50 ways to do this better, or 20 ways to do this other thing, there's a really obvious one which I thought, well, do I hold it for the end, or do I just get on with it? And I'm just going to get on with it. And the really obvious one is, if your computer is like 1,000,000 years old, and it's got 1 gig of RAM, and you're running Windows, XP on it or whatever else, you know what? There's a time when you really want to just throw some money at the whole thing and get some better hardware. I'm just going to go out and say that right at the start. So when we did ComicBase 2020, we bumped the system requirements that we asked for. The funny thing is, actually, it's easier on your system than the last one was, but we wanted to be more realistic about what gives you like a good experience. And so we're asking for basically, I think, a 2.6 gigahertz machine with 4 gigs of RAM or better, and a certain amount of hard drive space depending on the version you're using. That is all true, and you should all do that. Obviously faster is better. But the main things, if you're thinking, hey, it's time for me to upgrade my machine, or I'm really not happy with how my machine's working, there's 2 things you can do that will make a big difference for ComicBase, and there's a lot of things you can do that really won't make much difference at all. The things that won't make much difference at all are like buying a really bitchin' graphics card, or throwing more RAM at it, beyond 8 gigs or so, or getting like a million megahertz processor. I mean, those things that they don't hurt, but you're not going to see the difference like you will some other things. The things that you'll really see the difference on are if you buy what's called an SSD. It's a solid state disk drive. And basically I describe it as being about the size of a pack of cards, but let me actually just point to a picture of this that I've pulled up earlier on, Tom's Hardware. So this is one of my favorite portable SSDs. It is, and I wish there was a picture so that if you can see this one over here, this is a more traditional SSD, and to give you an idea of the dimensions on this, because there's nothing in the frame that would tell you, it's about the length of a pack of cards, or if you guys are familiar with an unboxed hard drive like would be inside of your desktop, that's about the size of one of these things, except it's incredibly thin. This is maybe 3/8 of an inch thick. Anyway, since I was sort of researching before this one, I went and I did some digging on what are some of the better ones today, and the one I'm really quite fond of if you have a need for an external one. So like you've already got a computer, it's a laptop, or you've got something that you can't easily upgrade. You can get like a terabyte SSD, a solid state disk drive, that runs like 400 or 500 megabit or megabytes per second read speed, which is probably at least 10 times the speed of your hard drive. You can get this one for like, I want to say $80. It's frightening how cheap these things have gotten, and it's actually smaller than you'd think. This one here is, so the other one's about the size of a pack of cigarettes or a pack of cards. This one's about the size of the lighter, and it connects over USB 3. If you don't have something like this in your life, strongly consider you think about it. Another way you could go if you need faster hard drives, because hard drive is usually with database software, it's usually the thing where everything goes to hell. It's just spending time writing to your hard drive. Is you can also get just a USB stick, like a compact flash stick. Now, these ones they can be very, very cheap, but I wanted to pull a couple that I wanted to recommend in particular because they are not all created equal in terms of the overall speed. So this one over here, and you can see, I bought this one back in June 2nd. It's actually recording this show as we speak right now. But this one here, it was a what was it? A 256 gigabyte flash drive. It's $64. The wiki buy here claims you can get it for 50, but that's actually a bad link. But $65, you get a 256 USB 3.1 drive. Then the important thing is that we'll read and write it. The read speeds are 420 megabytes per second. The write speeds are up to 380. Now, knock that down some for real world usage, but honestly, when you compare it to, like, if you have an older hard drive, you might be getting as low as 10 or 20 megs per second. I've done tech support with people who are getting like 5 megs per second. There's even one who was getting like about 3 on a sustained basis. You're talking about something that's going to go 30, 50 times faster than what you've got going on now. This is well worth considering. So if you have to throw money at the whole problem, a faster hard drive is number one by far, and the fastest hard drive is don't use a physical hard drive at all. Use memory, either in the form of an internal SSD, an external SSD like that ADATA one, the blue one we saw, or even just a really fast compact flash USB drive. That's going to give you the most bang for your buck. The second most bang for your buck you can get, just in terms of upgrading your machine, is get yourself at least 4 gigs of RAM. 8 gigs helps a lot. Now, why do you need to go 8 gigs or more? Because Windows itself is going to want to consume a couple gigs just for itself and all the basic things it wants to do, and ComicBase wants to have a couple gigs to itself. And then you probably got, whether you know it or not, 120 other programs running at the same time. If you ever want to get terrified about what's actually going on in your computer, come up under here and type the following: TASKMGR, which conveniently enough, that opened up on my other drive, other screen, so you can't see it, but I will bring the task manager over. But TASKMGR will bring up the task manager, which then shows you everything that's really going on your machine. Now, at the moment, I think I have 5 or 6 applications open, right? I really, as it turns out, have 161 applications going on, and this is what they're all doing. Windows spins up an enormous amount of stuff in the background without showing you, and so and it takes up various amounts of your time and space. Now, an important thing to see here over the Task Manager is this is what my CPU is doing. My CPU right now is barely doing a thing. My memory, okay, about 40% full. My disk is barely ticking over, and this is with me streaming. And my network is doing next to nothing because the network encoding for the stream is actually being done on my switcher itself. When you look and you try to figure out where your computer problems are, Task Manager is a great place to start and say, well, what about my system is getting hammered? And if you're having trouble when you're using ComicBase, I'm going to tell you right now, the thing that's killing you probably is disk. And second beyond that is the CPU, and that's caused usually by running out of memory. But those are the things you want to optimize: is your disk first, your memory second, and then you'll find in general, unless you have just an incredibly low power CPU, that the CPU is going to take care of itself. But anyway, that's the spending money part of the show. So everything else is going to be how to make ComicBase run faster without spending money. So let's get on with that. I'll close some of these windows. All right. So, all right, basic hints. All right, first thing I'm going to say is learn your command keys. So when you look at all the commands in ComicBase, things like this, you'll notice that along the right-hand side here are going to be certain things that get there faster. So if I want to open a database, it's not my regular one, I hit Control-O and it'll bring up the dialog. If I want to go to my collection statistics, I hit the F12 key on my keyboard and it'll get me there. Now, most of the command keys in ComicBase are used for things that we do a lot of. So things like adding a new comic, or a new comic book is always going, or a new whatever your thing is always going to be Control N. Finding something is always Control F. Adding by barcode and so forth. There's going to be also shortcut keys for all the basic things like duplicating something. So it's worth, when you find yourself doing something again, going back and figuring out where you're spending your time and getting those things, so you're hitting them on the keyboard and supposed to have to, key them in by yourself. Another thing to worry about is context menus. A context menu is when I go over a certain part of the screen and I can click there, but then I right-click and it's going to give me a menu that the contents of this menu is very much dependent on what I just clicked on. So right-click is the key here, and there's a couple different places that you can do this in particular. So if I go and if I highlight a line first and I right-click, these are all the things I can do on an individual or more than one comic issue in the grid view. I can, I can quick change it. I can, add a new issue. I can download the cover, or if I have the archive edition, I can print price labels and so forth, right? I also, there are context menus. Let's go ahead and switch this to album view. All right. And I can go ahead and I can right click on, run out here, and here's all the things I can do on an individual item in the album view. And then finally, there's some that you might not see at first glance. So there's a couple hidden ones up here. There's one on the picture itself, where I can go here and go immediately to show the picture file in Windows. And so this is where that picture lives. I can also right-click up on the title over here, and these are all the things I can do for the selected title right away. I can, for instance, I can immediately do a Google search on it. I can search the Grand Comic Database for it. But I can also do some really cool stuff, like I can print the divider labels for this series just right from there, and that goes you straight to printing with the dividers with this title already selected, so I don't need to select it again. So it gives me a quick way of getting these kind of quick reports. I can do a quick report just on this, just give me a report just on everything that I own of this particular title. And I can do this with this, with just one click there, hit return, and then I'm good to go. All right, so these are all basics that, if you know them, it helps. But those are four right there. Okay, another thing I would say is whenever possible, if there's work to be done and you don't need to do it, that is going to be your win. So let me make sure that sidekick's running, and it is. Okay, so if we look down here, and darn it, it doesn't show. All right, so actually, let me see if I can flip this around so that it's going to show my main monitor over on the one that y'all are looking at. I think I can make this. Yes, I can make this happen. Awesome. Okay. Sorry, I just did some gimmicking with my Windows settings, and now this should be a little bit better. All right, so now if you look down here by your bottom right-hand corner, you will see, and let me see if I can get that to magnify. Yes, I can. All right. So you'll see either you're going to see a little superhero guy there, or if you don't see him right now, click the up arrow one, and you'll find Sidekick. Sidekick is, he had his growing pains in the ComicBase universe as far as becoming an acceptable member of the community, but he's getting to be like a really essential dude. What he does is he's just there to handle all the junk work of using the program that's no darn fun to do. You get to him again by going down by your clock area here, clicking this guy right here, and now right-clicking to bring him up. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up Open to show him his interface. All right, so here it is, and it's a bit magnified. And what he's doing right now is he's worried about two databases for me. There's Pete's database, and I guess I took out the Livestream database. But what he can do is he does 5 things, right? He can update my database content. He can check for new sales and purchases if I sell or buy things on Atomic Avenue. I'm sorry, if I've bought or sold things using the remote app. If I post things if I make sales on Atomic Avenue, he can automatically keep my inventory updated. He can save my database to the cloud and also generate reports while you're at it. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And he can keep my database optimized, which keeps it having the least amount of space on disk possible. Now, you see right now these functions are unavailable while ComicBase is opening, so all these guys are gray right now. If I close ComicBase, they'll suddenly light up. So that's a thing. By the way, this came up in a tech support call at one point. If you don't see them light up and you don't see a database listed there, click the little gear icon over here and make sure that you've got at least one database selected in the sidekick settings. If you don't, click plus, add your database, and then you'll see ComicBase was able to work with that one. Another kind of neat thing about Sidekick is he can work with more than one database. So, for instance, if you have more than one database you need to manage, like I've got my database and my kids' comics, or I got a collection I sell on consignment, you can have it take care of all the databases at once and automatically keep them updated and backed up and so forth. All right, let me go through a little bit of the things that people don't know about Sidekick in terms of kind of like his particular superpowers, right? All right, first of all, you want to make him so he runs sometime when your computer's on, but you're not paying attention. Best idea is do this at some point very early in the morning. I guess for me, 8:50 p.m. is good, or 9:36 in the morning before I've finally gotten up to do things. But if you don't have it set to anything in particular, set these guys for like 2 a.m. Check and post sales. And I can do that, I'll do that, I don't know, daily sounds good. And set this for like 2 in the morning, right? Or check for updates. The magical time when we post updates is almost always Thursday nights. So if you want to hit it, you can have it checked weekly. I'm going to have it checked daily. And I'm going to have it checked for that one at 9 p.m., which I know is going to be after we post it for the week. And then when you go ahead and you save these settings here, then what will happen is ComicBase just minds his own business. He runs in the background, and when it's time for him to go, as long as you have ComicBase closed, he'll go ahead, fire off, and do all the things you asked him to do. All right. A couple of things that I definitely suggest you ask him to do, which most people don't think about, is under save to cloud, right? You can have him not only back up your data on someplace that isn't your computer, but you also can have him automatically generate reports so you can hit them for your mobile, from your mobile side. This only applies to folks who have the Pro or the Archive edition, but what you can do then is instead of having to have you remember to save up your inventory reports up to the whole thing, every time you back your data up to the cloud, it will automatically generate, in my case, a collection overview and a collection report. Now, issue checklists, for me, they're too long. They're not particularly useful for me, and I don't sell comics, by handing out price lists, so I don't use these two. But these two here, in particular the collection overview, are absolutely my go-to reports for viewing when I'm on the road and I'm looking through stuff at the comic shops. So just have ComicBase Sidekick make those for you every week when you backs up your database, and your stuff is always going to be updated, and that's a good thing. The cool thing then is, like I say, Sidekick is going to run in the background. Most of the time you never know he's running, because all you see from him is a little guy down here. If he's actually going, you'll see that he will give you just a little. Sorry, I got to get out of magnify mode. This guy right here will start having arrows pointing along him. But that's the only time you actually see these doing anything at all. Most of the time you just get a message saying, yeah, he did what he was supposed to do, and everything just keeps in sync. So for me, I never actually have to go check my sales. I never have to go post my inventory. I never have to go, download the content updates, because I just leave my machine on, and ComicBase did all the stuff for me in the middle of the night, and I didn't have to pay attention to it at all. So for me, no work at all is the win on that one. Okay. Other basic hints. Let's see here. Moving around in the program. All right, so let's see here. Really, I'm sorry, just looking at the comments here. It's like Greg goes, really, I can't keep using ComicBase on my Commodore 64. But I don't know if you can make that happen. That's more power to you, man. All right, let's see here. Okay. Oh, yeah. And by the way, clarification point on Greg said on the Control N comments. When you do Control N, you get the pop-up for creating a new comic title. That is correct. The reason is because in ComicBase 2020, we intentionally wanted to blur the lines some between making a ComicBase title and making a ComicBase issue. So if you're doing Control N, that's to create a new title, and what happens then is it adds one for the it asks you for the current title you want to add it to. If that title exists, you can just type it out and you'll go there. If it doesn't exist, you'll be prompted to create the title as you go, and then you're straight into creating the issue. If you just want to add another issue to an existing series, what you would, best way to do that is go down here in the bottom right-hand corner right here. You see this plus and minus here. If I hit plus, it's going to create the next numbered issue for the series that I'm already on. So at that point, all I got to do is hit 2, hit save, and then it makes the next issue. Now, there was no second issue from Batman Penguin Triumphant, so it's not going to find a cover for it. So I'm just going to also highlight that, hit delete, and remove it, because this thing, that particular issue does not exist. All right, so let me go back to chat. Was there anything else I knew there? Control L used to make a new title, so it threw me for a loop. Yeah, and like I say, we used to, making a new title, making a new issue used to be two separate tasks. Now they're part of the same task. Because, again, a lot of people just really didn't get the whole concept that issues need to belong to titles, and you have to make the title first and whatnot. So now what we want you to think is just like, hey, I got another magazine, I want to add it, and so you start saying new, and if that as it asks you for the title, if that title already exists, it just goes there, and if it doesn't exist, you're already doing the things you need to do to create the title. So that was meant to be there, but it is a bit of a change in mode from previous versions of ComicBase. Okay, all right, so moving around the database. First thing I see people do that they get wrong is, well, the biggest thing people used to get wrong, and we got rid of some of this by getting rid of the, there used to be a big find button right here. It used to look like a magnifying glass. We got rid of that in ComicBase 2020 because the find moved into being part of this, we basically put find right out on the main thing right here. And another thing we did to try to get people to not do the bad thing. The bad thing was using find to move around the database all the time. So if I wanted to find Seduction of the Innocent, what people used to do is they used to, go to find, they would go up, go to find a title, they would type Seduction of the Innocent, and and you could find it, right? But it's a lot of steps to get there, and we're definitely trying to get people to not do that. So first thing we did is we made it a little harder to get to the full-on find. If you do want to get to it, by the way, it's some of the short finds are right here in this menu. The full-on find, the old-fashioned one, is over here under Other, at which point you can find all the different things you might have ever wanted to look for before. Anyway, so but the other thing that people do to this day, because this used to be the fast way of getting around the database, is you would use the titles window over here. So these buttons on the far right this is to move to the next title, this is to move to the previous title, and it used to be the money was this one right here, titles. All right. I would suggest for most folks, most of the time, you never want to use this. Why? All right, so the reason is, unless I'm just really clueless as to what the title might be, I can do everything I used to do in that title thing just by starting to type down here. Like, let's say I want to find, Bane, or Vengeance of Bane, or something like that. So here's Batman Bane, here's Batman Vengeance of Bane, right? I did all that just by typing a couple letters in the main find right here. And I got there very, very quickly. This is going to be the quickest way to move around the database, because it only needs to load up a list based on what you've typed. It doesn't need to load a really long list of titles just to get started. Now, and this is, again, something that's very different, because I have an SSD on my hard drive and some people don't. If you don't have an SSD on your hard drive and you click this titles button, the very first time you get there, now you see on mine it just popped right up. We've had folks report that it takes 5 seconds for this thing to pop up if you're doing it on a hard drive based computer. And the reason is ComicBase has to do a search for, find me all the titles, and then put them into this big long list, right, to start with, right? And this is a list currently of 60,000 items. So that's a lot of work for your computer to do, is to, you know, make up a list box with 60,000 items in it. And now, granted, I've got a pretty fast computer with an SSD, so it still did it in half a second. But if you've got, you know, if it's taking 5-10 seconds to move around the database, the first thing you want to do is don't use this dialog unless you have to. Just go ahead and use the main title search right there. Now, what this dialog, you know, if this dialog is so bad, why does it even exist? A couple of reasons. One is it is the one place you can go to see just the whole darn list, right? Because again, you know, you signed up to see all 60,000 items in one big thing. That's what we're going to give you. We're not going to give it to you in a drop-down combo on the main list. Another thing is it's pretty good for seeing things like, let's go back to that idea of Bane, right? So, you know, Baneberry Academy, Bane Conquest. What I can do here is I can actually just tab up and down, and I could see, like this sort of deal until you finally get, oh, right, it's that one, right? So this is a pretty convenient way to do that kind of work, you know, and see everything in a really big picture. Whereas you can do something very similar out here on the main, right? Where I can do that, but the picture's going to be much smaller, and if there's some little fine point about it that I need to see in order to get what the difference is, maybe the bigger window is helpful for that. But anyway, that's in general, I'd say avoid moving around the database by using the titles. Do it by choosing something from here. And now let me go to a really big one, Action Comics, right? All right. And I'm also going to say, all right, oh yeah, a couple of other things. Now, I just did something, and this is a good one because I was about to share the hint. Don't use title view, don't use album view for really, really long titles. So what's the thing I did to illustrate this is I picked up title view for one of the longest titles in the darn database. So bear with me for several long agonizing seconds as the title view for Action Comics builds, which by the way is really pretty to look at. On the other hand, it takes quite a while because right now it's going out and I'm not sure what I've got my view set to, but it's probably building the thumbnails for either 500 or 1,000 comics right at this very second in time. Yes, there we are. Oh great, I asked for 800 thumbnails at once, all of which it just had to build. So if you care, here is the thumbnails for Action Comics in my collection. Notice how these are all, I've set them so it dims out the ones that I don't own. To my great horror, I do not actually own an Action Comics #1. If any of you guys would like to remember me in your wills, I know several of you have it. You know, always wanted to, never did. Anyway, but okay. So the thing I wanted to say initially was, if you were dealing with large titles, as beautiful as the album view is, grid view kicks its butt. I would definitely suggest, and I'm going to even just switch to another title just so I can move on faster. Just because everything gets very, very sluggish when you're moving this many graphics around on screen at once. In fact, I'm going to short circuit the whole process and just clobber that one right where it stands and relaunch. All right. So what is far faster is if you go up and you view by grid. All right. So let's go ahead now and let's do the same thing, Action Comics again, in grid view. 1001, and boom, we're there, right? It took no time at all. Grid view is nowhere near as pretty, but my God, is it faster than album view. Mostly because you're dealing with, pre-cached thumbnails of all this stuff. There's no need to relay out, grids of items that may or may not be the same size and so forth. You lose up in the aesthetics of the whole thing, but man, you pick it up in speed. So grid view for moving around fast, album view for looking pretty is the way I would say that goes. All right, another thing as a pro tip, you notice how I'm always referring you up to this top center, the find by title name or barcode. I'm always, reviewing you up to that section. All right, I'm going to put the cursor down here. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit, here's the magic command key, Control J. Now, if you can see, it's hard to see because it's a little tiny blinking thing, but my cursor just went to this field right there, which means anytime I'm working anywhere in this main grid view and I want to go and move on to another title, type Control J, and then you're immediately in a place to start moving to, Batman, Vengeance of Bane or something like that. Vengeance of Bane 2. There we are. So you don't need to take your hands off the. You don't need to move your mouse at all. You don't need to take your. You can leave your hands on the keyboard, and you can very quickly get back to where you want to go. Control J immediately jumps you to there. If you guys remember older versions of ComicBase, Control J was jump, and it still does the same thing it used to. Just because jump is now integrated with everything else, the same habits you learned from before still work. All right, let's see here. And Rob Weinberg points out that main title search doesn't have an in stock, which I like in the other search, which again is another good reason to use this titles thing up here. So for instance, I can say, show me the things I actually own, at which point it makes the much smaller list of things over here. That is a true thing. Now I do believe, though, and this was controversial during the design of ComicBase 2020, I do believe if you set your main view over here to items to show, if you set this to owned items, at that point then I think the options it gives you here are all going to be titles you own. I believe, or maybe no. I think no. I guess in the end I think we decided against it because I think the user testing on it was terrible. So I think in the end we backed off that one. But I remember at one point we tried it, but there were some of these things that we tested out, and people didn't get why they weren't seeing all their titles, and they would generate tech support. Then that was something that we backed away from. All right, moving on. Let's see. Tips for moving around the database. All right, let's say I'm looking for something with a weird, a title like let's say Vengeance of Bane, right? Batman Vengeance of Bane. All right, now is it Batman Special Vengeance of Bane? Is it Batman, Presents? Where else? I can get there a couple different ways. So if I start typing BATMAN, right now I'm in the Batman section of things, and I can scroll up and down and see the different ones. You might notice that we have rather a lot of Batman, right? So I'm not going to get there very quickly going like that. All right, what I could do is I can say things like Batman. If I know the next thing is Vengeance of Bane, I'm there. But let's say I couldn't remember. I remember it had Bane in it, but I don't, and it was Batman, but I don't remember the rest of it. Take the weirdest word that you do know is part of the title, and you'll get there fast. So if I just type Bane, right, and it's in the top 7 or 8 hit things, even though it's way down the list there. Batman versus Bane, Batman Vengeance Bane, etc. Just go with Bane. If you're looking for something that involves, I don't know, Gravity Falls or something like that, or the vengeance of the vengeance of the iguana or something, or I'm trying to think of what was the crazy one. We were talking about Muggy Doo before, but take the weirdest word that you're sure is part of the title and look for that one instead. It will prioritize things that are at the start, will always appear in the front of the list. But what'll happen then is after all the ones that start with that list, the next comes the things where that word is anywhere in the list. You'll see there's a break between all the mummy ones here and then ones that contain mummy. And then later on with that are going to be things that maybe aren't even comic books. So like let's go back to Seduction of the Innocent. Minor bit of comic history on this one, because, and I'm going to get distracted for 2 seconds on this one. I am a huge fan of EC Comics. EC Comics to me are like, that is my happy place in terms of like just comic stuff. We're talking about Tales from the Crypt, shock suspense stories, or honestly, and I even loved, the new trend stuff that Aces High and all the other cool stuff that they did later on when they were facing a lot of pressure. Anyway. EC Comics, famously, in the 1950s, comic books were actually pretty lurid. A lot of companies were doing the same kind of thing. EC was just better storytelling, better drawing than almost all of them. But they famously came under fire in the 1950s by a guy named Frederick Wortham. He was a psychologist. I'm going to say... having read the book, I'm not particularly fond of his ability to use statistics. I mean, he was very good at using statistics to lie. If I wanted to give my kids a course on how to do this, I would use the same kind of things he did. So, for instance, he would say, well, I study, kids who became juvenile delinquents. That was the big scare of the 1950s, was juvenile delinquents. Right behind that was commies. But anyway, and he said, like, I found in every single case of all the criminals that, I've gone there, they all read comic books. And so he, from that, determined that comic books were the cause of them becoming juvenile delinquents. What he left out of the story was the 1950s, everyone read comic books. There was like about the one thing you could do as a kid in terms of reading that everyone could afford and do and stuff like that. So you also, if you were surveying, future, farmers of America, you'd find out that every one of them read comic books. If you're surveying, members of the Boy Scouts, you'd find every one of them read comic books. So the same kind of, bad statistic, reversal of, or confusing cause and effect and correlation. Is all throughout his book. Anyway, this brings me back to Seduction of the Innocent. So he very famously published a book called Seduction of the Innocent. It was an extension of articles he'd written for, I want to say, Reader's Digest. It might have been Family Circle. I'll have to double check that. But anyway, it got compiled into a book and extended, and this became really the thing, that and the talks he gave and the testimony he gave before the Kefauver Committee became the thing that led to the Comics Code, that stamp you see on all the comic books, after the 1950s, in order to prove that they were safe for children, and if you were a child, to prove that they were really, really boring. But anyway, Seduction of the Innocent was a very famous book, and so it was one of the first books to make it into ComicBase. So let's have a look. And then right now, you notice I'm in comic books right here, but I'm going to look for Seduction of the Innocent. So I type SEDUCTIO. All right, so here's Seduction, all right, and then let's go of the Innocent. All right, and what's the first thing I'm going to find? Well, okay, Dynamite published a series of horror comics by that name. Eclipse had done that years earlier, and then followed by Kettle Drummer also did the same kind of thing. And then finally, I get the thing I really wanted, which is the book, which is exactly entitled what I chose. Seduction of the Innocent. So why didn't that appear first in the searches? Well, the answer is just because I was looking at comics before. ComicBase is always going to assume that the thing you were doing before is the thing you want to do now, or the thing you're most interested in. So if you're looking for something and you're not finding it right away, make sure you're looking in the right category, because otherwise it's going to appear further down the list than you might think. By the way, if I didn't know what I'm looking at, look down here at the really bottom right-hand corner. I'll magnify that a little bit so it's easier to see. Right down here with anything you've selected in this list will appear, let me go ahead and do it again. So, Seduction of the Innocent. All right, you'll see this is the publisher details of whatever I'm looking at, a little picture of it if one's available, and then, the years it was published to help you figure out. I mean, what this really helps for is things like, which Justice League of the, of the 7,000 series of Justice League, which one am I thinking of? And it gives you the, the years to help you find it. But then finally it tells you what media it is, right? And because I was looking at comic books, it's going to list all the comic book ones first. But then if I go down further down the line, there's actually Seduction of the Innocent, but which is a book. Now, if I click on it, whoops, unlock my mouse and move over here, you'll notice it actually switched my category to books. And so now if I were to go and look for something like Seduction of the Innocent, the very first title is going to be Seduction of the Innocent right there, because I'm searching books now. It's only going to do things that aren't books if it can't find any more, right? So that's a good way to sort of narrow down what you're searching for and get there with less keystrokes. Is, first of all, make sure you're in the right place. By the way, I remember I talked about, knowing your, your command keys. If I want to quickly switch between books, comic books, and magazines, Control 1, Control 2, Control 3 will get me between those different categories. There's a lot of different ways to go to sort of accelerate that sorts of things. All right, let me go back to comic books and unmagnify the screen so we can see more than about two things at once. All right. And let's push on. How are we doing for time? Wow, I am really getting deep into this. We're probably going to have to bust this into 2 episodes because I realized I was going here that I had a lot to say. All right. I talked about grids being faster. All right. Let's move into finding your position in a big title. So let's talk about, let's go back to, and I'm making sure that I'm on, the grid view right now. And I'm going to go back to our friend Action Comics. All right, and okay, so, all right, let's say I wanted to go to Action Comics 697, right? All right, there's a bunch of ways I could do that, and let's start in descending order of horribleness, all right? Bad way number one is to sit there and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, right? It's going to take me forever to get there. So if I were just to hit the, the down arrow on my scroll bar, or if you use the scroll wheel on your mouse, that's typically how you're going to scroll, all right? A quicker way to scroll, a lot of people don't know it, and let's bounce over, magnify it, is scroll bars. It sounds dumb, but this is one of those things that we keep on seeing on tech support calls. Scroll bars can get you things by clicking up and down. They can also, you can grab the center of it and just drag up and down, right? You also, if you click the area in between scroll bars, go up like that, it's going to scroll by pages, right? All right. So that's scroll bar stuff. So if I had, say 697, I could get there relatively quickly by just grabbing the middle of this, scroll down to about, there it is, 697. I could get there, right? It's a perfectly valid way to go. But, and let's scroll to the top again, there's a way quicker way to get there, right? And that is, you guys might remember when we talked about the jump command that used to be in ComicBase beforehand. Jump would do two kind of interesting things, right? So Control J. So Control J right now takes you to the main thing over here where I can type in part of a title and get to that. One thing it could do before, I could also type in a barcode, go directly to that place. But one thing it could do before, and we can't do it with Control J anymore because there are way too many titles that are numbers. But what we can do now, if you use F3, what that says is when I'm in a big list, go immediately to a particular element of it. So I'm just going to, here's 699, right? Jump. Boom, I'm at 699. And it did another thing while it was out there. It highlighted the whole row. Why do I care that it highlights the whole row? All right, and if you guys see one thing from this entire broadcast, this is, if you don't know how to do this, this is the one thing. I should mark this in the time. And we're about 46 minutes in. Yeah, I kept the most important tip for this one, which is when the whole row is highlighted like this, I can just use the keys. And here, let's introduce the overhead camera here. All right, this is my keyboard. Is I can use the keys right above the keys right here, or I can use the numeric keypad keys over here. But if I type a number from 0 to 9, it will set for all the selected items. It'll set that as their quantity in stock. I'll switch back to the screen now. You notice that those all switch to 2 because I pressed 2. If I were if I press 3, they go 3. They go 4 to 4. I can go 0 to clear them out. I can also I'm going to set these to a couple different values right now just to mix it up, and now highlight them all again. I can also use plus and minus to increment and decrement, and I think I've got that switched off on my keyboard right now. But you can also go and increment and decrement the things as well. I think it's on the keypad. Let me try that. Yep. Yeah. So if I go over to the keypad, let me switch over there so you see that again. So over on my keyboard, if I use these two keys right here, and I go plus and whoops, not enter. All right, so bonus tip on this one is if I want to, I can also go ahead and oh, I'm sorry, I had a breakpoint set. Apologize for that. So a bonus point: if you do go ahead and you are editing something and you want to get out of it very quickly. Anything where you see the blue highlight around it, that means the Enter key is going to activate it. And if there is a way to get out of it, that's the equivalent of cancel, Escape on your keyboard is always going to activate it's always going to activate the cancel button. But going back to our screen right over here, so you'll see that the quantities here. Let's highlight all 5 of these now. If I highlight those and I hit the minus key on my keyboard, they're going to go like that, and it'll increment and decrement whatever I've got. So I could either just type a number from 0 to 10 to set them to that, or not. My favorite use of this in general is when I've got, somebody gave me a copy of Action Comics number 552, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F3. I'm going to immediately go to Action Comics 552, jump to it. It's highlighted. I punch a 1 on my keyboard. Whoops. I punch a 1 on my keyboard, and it's in stock. So that is of all the ways to enter comic books in ComicBase, that is the only method that's potentially faster than using a barcode scanner. Is if I know that, for instance, that I've got Action Comics number 549 through, 590, right? Highlight them all, punch a 1, it's going to mark them all in stock at once, and, for those 55 comics or whatever that is, boom, they're in stock with 1 keystroke. That is by far the way to go. Steve Dasner points out with F3 you'd have to have an exact match. That is exactly correct. You can't be close. So in other words, if there was no 564 but there was a 564A, it's just going to beep at you. All right. Does Control-J still work with the barcode reader? It does. And the reason Control-J works with the barcode reader is because Control-J moves your cursor up here, right? And this up here is looking for either a barcode or a title. So I'm just going to go ahead and bleep in a barcode now. And if you guys could see what was happening, what the barcode really did is it very, very quickly typed the number that was on that particular issue, which was 9781561643262508895. Right. All it really did was very quickly type that number. Now, why isn't it not looking for a title called 9781 or whatever else? Well, initially it would be, except that we know that once you get past a certain length, there are certain magical lengths of barcodes. If it still has nothing but digits in it, or maybe an X in it, we know that it probably isn't a title, it's probably a barcode, so we check there first. And that being said, if you were looking for something called 44 Magnum, if I just start typing 44, you notice how it's going for titles that start with 44 initially. But once I, and the same thing goes if I, type, 0 or something like that. So if I type 07, whatever else, at a certain point it realizes I'm not just typing a title, I'm typing a barcode, and it jumps there immediately. But the net effect of that is if you were kind of in the habit before of saying, I want to go ahead and jump to, what's this name? If you were in the habit of saying, I want to jump to a title by going Control-J, beeping in a title, and then doing it that way, that still works, mostly, using the new scheme of things. Okay, other things, way to go. And I got 9 minutes left to go. All right, before I get on to the next set here, Rick Geary, thank you. Okay, so let's see here. Big list, keep it all the time. Control. Okay, all right. So, what I'm going to try to do, by the way, for the next couple of what I'm going to try to do for the next couple of these live streams is I'm going to try to have a kind of a general theme, but kind of divvy up the time so it's more half and half your questions and half what the live stream's about. So if I give it a really dull topic, I don't know, analysis of currency trends as regards to your comic collection or something like that, and let's say that was not your number one favoritist thing forever. What I'm probably going to do is there's going to be whatever news I've got, with the program or other things that's going on will be at the top of the stream. I'll try to hit the main topic there, and I'm going to try to use all the rest of the time for viewer questions. So one way or another, I'm going to try to get you guys more plugged into what we're talking about here. So that being said, so do send me your questions. So you can either send them to me directly at, because those are words. I like to use those sometimes. P Bickford. So letter P, Bickford, that's why you always have to spell your name out to folks. I always say B like boy, ICK, and then Ford like the car. That seems to get folks to Bickford, okay. At human-computing.com. And especially if you say something like, hey, question for the show, I'll try to stack yours to the top of the list for next time out. And going forward, the same kind of idea. Okay, so let's see. Do you have want to do no issue in after the convert? Andre's asking, he has no issues after he did a conversion of the database. If you find you've converted a database and all your issues seem like they went away, what is almost certainly going on is you converted the wrong database. Typically so when ComicBase starts, it makes a database called ComicBase Database. In more recent versions, it's now called My Collection. But if you had one called ComicBase Database, but then a lot of people say, well, ComicBase Database doesn't really feel like me. I want to call it Pete's Comics, which is, strangely enough, what mine are actually called. That's great, as long as I remember that my stuff is in Pete's Comics, and that blank database called ComicBase database, which it made the first time I ran the program, is still around there unless I delete it. And so typically what will happen is when you move to a new machine, it'll say, well, what database do you want to convert? It'll remember your preferences if you had them, especially if you're moving to a different machine. It doesn't have your old preferences, and so it goes looking for a database. And the first one it's going to suggest as a default is ComicBase database, which you'll recall was that blank one that didn't really speak to you, and so it's still blank because you haven't converted anything for it. So if you convert the old one to the new thing, you just converted a lot of blanks. So, well, I mean, it's not really blank. It's all the data, but the quantities are all 0, which is why it took some time. So if you're coming from an old database and you want to make sure you convert onto a new machine or something like that, or you don't see your data, if you still have access to your old machine, make sure you got the right database. A good way to make sure is if you see your data in the old version, do File, Save a Copy, and save it onto a flash drive or something as, database I want to convert, right? Then take that that flash drive over to your new machine. You'll see a file on there called database I want to convert. Open that one up, and when that converts, you'll see all your stuff. But yeah, typically what's going on whenever you convert and you don't see your stuff is you just copied the wrong database. Okay, so might also advertise these sessions and message boards. Yes, super would like to do that. And also, I apologize, I didn't do as much publicizing the last couple streams as I've done before. Part is I don't want to wear people out, and partly is I was trying to do a lot of stuff at the last minute so the stream looked cool, and I didn't have the time to give people enough lead. I do know most people watch the thing on the rebroadcast, so I try to fix things up as much as I can for those, but I do want to do a better job of getting messages out ahead of time to tell people that the stream's coming up. Okay, so Andre says that backup I used to convert the use to backup on my server. Yeah, again, if you had more than one database, especially old versions of ComicBase Sidekick used to automatically work with any database you'd ever opened. One of the reasons we make you explicitly choose your database in the new Sidekick is because of this issue. But what would happen is typically you had been working initially with ComicBase database, would be the database that's by default what you're using. You'd go start using my comics or Pete's comics or whatever else, which then is the one that it would open every time when you start the program, because it always remembers the last one you open and does that automatically. But it never forgot that once upon a time you once used ComicBase database, and so every time you were backing up to the cloud, it made sure to back up that one too. And so if you just pull down whatever we had on our server, you got a good chance that it's one of those ones you really didn't care about. Again, we kind of learned the hard way over the years not to do this as much. In other words, like make you explicitly choose which databases you want to work with, as opposed to trying to just, well, he opened it up, he must care. That was our thinking before, but it does lead to problems like this. So just check your databases using your old machine, and if necessary, there's also a tool. I'll show it to you. It's called the ComicBase Database Manager. If you go into your File menu, go down to File Tools. You make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. So under the File menu, go to File Tools. And along with all things you can do, there's a thing that says ComicBase Database Manager. If you were to launch this, what it will do is it will kick off a little program. We had an intern write for us actually, but man, we used the heck out of this. What it will do is it will automatically search every single file on your hard drive. It takes a while, so let it go. But it'll search every folder on your hard drive, all the disks and everything else, and look for anything that looks like a ComicBase database. And once that's done, it will go ahead and tell you, all right, all the databases I've got, this is what's in them. It'll give you the counts of all the all the data, because the file size really doesn't tell you much. It's really for databases. Databases grow and shrink for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with the raw amount of data in them. But it'll tell you how many comics are listed in each one, what the values of each one, the last time it was modified, and so forth. That's a really good thing to run every once in a while to do some cleanup. Delete the ones that are 0, that are doing you no good. Delete backups of things you didn't use, and so forth. But it'll tell you, you'll see which one has the most stuff is typically the one you want to use. Use that one. Convert that one over to your new machine, and that'll help you out. Okay, so, all right, I think we are almost at the hour. Is there something else I can do really, really quickly to help you out? Yeah, there's one other tip I want to show folks real quickly, and I'm going to do it because I went to all the trouble of pulling a couple books I wanted to inventory here just to show this off. And that's also why there was the overhead camera, so let me switch to that one. I'm very proud of this overhead camera setup. I hope it's visible. At the very least, you can see all the clutter on my desk. But anyway, when you're going in ComicBase and you want to go ahead and if you have the Pro or the Archive edition, the quickest way in general, when I get new books in, what I do to enter them is I go up under here, under the items menu, and I say add by barcode. Except I don't really do that because I just do Control-I because I've memorized this because I do it every damn time. So once I've got add by barcode, it pulls up this window like this, at which point, and I'm going to go ahead and switch to the overhead camera. I grab my trusty barcode scanner right over here. I used to have it sitting on my desk, but if you guys could see even the wider shot of my desk, it's so crowded now, I had no room to even lay it under my desk. I have to keep it in a little cubby underneath. But what I'll do then is I'll grab a stack of the comic books that I want to put in. So here's Treasury of Victorian Murder by Rick Geary. All right, and I just beep, I just scan each one in turn like this. And there, and flipping back to the screen, and you'll see that it just adds them all to the thing as we go here. So anyway, so what I'm doing over here is I'm going to go ahead and before I hit save, and this is the important bit, there's two little things we added in to the bottom of this window. The one that was there before is called display items after saving. People saw it before, but they never knew why the heck you'd want to. And the new one is called print divider labels for new titles. That one saves me so much freaking time. It is easily my second favorite feature in the new version. Because what it does is, if I had never, one of the things I added here was the very first one of that title in my particular ComicBase, what it would do is immediately take the list of everything that I'm typing here, or everything that I'm adding, the big box of comic books we get every week from Diamond, all the new titles, it would immediately print divider labels for them, which saves me so much time when I go to file of running around and trying to figure out which of those dang things, I need to run upstairs and take a little note. It's like, make sure that, we add a new one for Batman, Mask of the Phantom, or whatever, second series, whatever the all new stuff is, all those labels are automatically printed. I don't need to remember a thing. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about the second one of those now, display items after saving. Why would I want to display them after saving? Well, first of all, let me show you what it does. So if I hit save now, all right, first of all, it adds them to my collection. If I had the sound on, you'd hear that it played a beautiful little bling, right? And then I can come up under here, and I can highlight these guys and do stuff with them. So this is what it does is it automatically looks up the ones I just added. Now, of the things I can do with them, I usually do two things. I usually do one thing with it, which is I print ID labels for them all. Other people want to come up under here and say, for instance, do a quick change and say all of these ones I'm going to add onto box 23. So come up under here, maybe say quick change and say use one of your custom fields, and say custom field, it's box 23. At which point, all three of those that I just added get marked as box 23. And if I had this 100 at once or something, this sort of thing goes very quickly. Also, I can do multiple quick changes because the things stay selected. I can just keep on hitting Control G to quick change and change all sorts of different things. I can say, hey, I bought them all at a yard sale. They all cost me $1, and I'm going to store them in box 23. And I bought them on this date, or whatever the things are that I want to change. They're all highlighted at once, and so it's very easy for me to work with them. The thing I do with them is I highlight them all at once. And you remember the context menu for here is printing ID labels, or just hit F6. At which point, this comes up here, and notice I didn't need to select the items. They were already selected because I highlighted them when I chose this. And it already remembered my last label printer. It remembered the last type of label I did. It remembers that I like them with barcodes and so forth. At which point, I just hit print. And then, it warns me that some of these things have more than one copy in stock. Do I want to print multiple labels? I'm going to say no. Unfortunately, this is off camera. Let's see if I can crank the overhead camera enough to see down to the bottom right-hand corner underneath a postal scale. You can't really see it, but what just wandered off my printer was 3 beautifully printed labels. All right. So anyway, These then get applied to the comics in my question. Everything gets filed. All my divider labels are filed. I'm good to go. And that's kind of the deal. All right, well, anyway, that's pretty much the show for today. We're going to do this again next week, and well, I think what we'll do is we'll do part 2 of speed tips next week, because I got a bunch more. They tend to be like little futzy weird things no one knows about. Like, one of the things I'll be talking about is all the different weird things where you can press either Shift, Alt, or Control and have ComicBase do weird things that we never told you about, which maybe some of them you never want done, but some of them, you know, there are a whole bunch of little weird things that ComicBase can do very quickly if you press down those keys, and we'll document all those next time out along with a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, thank you everyone for coming. This was a lot of fun, and once again, the usual pitch, if you could like and subscribe, it helps a lot, and then if you hit the little bell icon on YouTube, yeah, if you hit the little bell icon, it also gives you a note when we're going to be going live, so that lets you keep up with things. So thanks again, and everyone have a great weekend. Oh, have a great 4th of July, folks. It's it's been a year, but let's end it with or at least the first half with a bang. Take care. Bye bye.